good class. Excited about that class as well. And I'm so excited about tonight's class. This is the greatest story you'll ever read. The greatest story is the life of Christ. Let's begin by asking a question. Does anybody need an outline? Last week there were a few people that needed one, and I made some extra copies today. So I got you. There you go, Sharon. There you go, brother. Anybody else? Feel free. I made 5 of them. So there you go. I got you, Steve. I'm coming. Anybody else? So we're nearing the end of this. Most of you probably have this lesson. It is lesson 4, popularity. It'll say at the top, the second year of Jesus' ministry. Gave you the readings and the memory verses there, and that's where we're at. So we're going to continue in that lesson tonight. We're actually going to start in Luke chapter 7. We're going to talk about a really neat to me. It's a really interesting story, and there's a lot of just amazement in this next narrative part of Jesus' life. We are going to begin in Luke 7. We are at your Roman numeral number 7. Let me get my sheet back up here, and I'll see if I can help you. Roman numeral number 7, it should be a blank, and that blank is passion. That blank is passion, okay? 5 above, up there, you got 4 is puzzled. 5 was punishment. 6 is plea, it's already there. And 7 is passion. Passion. Luke chapter 7, we're going to see some passion from a woman who should have had none for Jesus, but she had all for Jesus. And we're going to see some really interesting things here. Luke 7, 36 to 50 will be our text to begin with tonight. And then if you look, we're kind of nearing the end of this lesson. I don't think we're going to get through it tonight. We've got quite a bit of reading to do, but and some comments. But then we'll go into lesson 5, part 1. I got your outline ready for that. I'm not going to hand that out yet because I don't want to confuse you worse than what you already are. But we'll have that one. Then we have lesson 5, part 2. And then lesson 6 will be Passion Week. And so we're a ways from Passion Week as far as our journey goes. But really excited. When we get to Passion Week, let me just give you a little bit of excitement there. So we're going to go by days in Passion Week, okay? So it's a week, and it's going to go by days. So like we're going to see things on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right through the crucifixion and right through the resurrection on the following Sunday. So really exciting. I think Passion Week for me is a little easier to follow than some of the life of Christ. When he gets to Jerusalem in Passion Week, here he is, this is what he's doing. And he set his face there, and he's doing what he came to earth to do. So, all right, let's begin with a word of prayer, and then we will jump right into Roman numeral number 7, Passion, Luke 7, 36 to 50. All right, let's bow. Thank you again, Father, for another opportunity to be together and another opportunity to share in your beautiful word. Thank you for allowing us to follow the footsteps of Jesus. Thank you for recording them for us, giving us confidence in that the Bible is a unified book and we can know it. Help us to be obedient to the things that we find herein. Help us to love you with all our heart. Help us to learn to love one another in the same manner. Help us to strive to be like Jesus. Father, he is the greatest example, and we fall so short of what we need to be for him. Please forgive us. Help us to confess those, especially those private sins. Help us to confess them privately to you. Cleanse us of those sins, Father, and help us to be right in your eyes. Give us courage and wisdom to continue. Give us strength for tomorrow, and help us to do all we can to be like Jesus. Strengthen us where we need it, Father. Chastise us where we need it as well, that we might be more like him. In Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so Passion. Luke 7, 36 to 50. Let's break that down. How about somebody read 36 through 42, and then somebody read 43 through 50. All right, Dan, you're going to read Luke 7, 36 to 42, and then who wants to pick up in verse 43 for us? See, James, you read, if you would, 43 through 50 then. Great.
Now one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. Okay, now it's not moving.
You're doing good, brother.
I know. My phone's not moving. That's still not moving. I gotta break out the hard copy here.
You're funny, Dad.
I get here in a second.
You're all right. You're all right. So Luke chapter 7 and in verse 36, and actually you read that. If you want to hit pick up in verse 37, that'd be great.
And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil, and she stood at his feet behind him, weeping, and she began to wash his feet with her tears, and wipe them with her hair of her head, and she kissed his feet, and anointed them with the fragrant oil. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he spoke to himself, saying, this man, if he were a prophet, who would know who and what man or woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. And Jesus answered and said unto him, Simon, I have something to say to you. So he said, Teacher, say it. There was a certain creditor who had two debtors, one who owed 500 denarii and the other 50. And when they had nothing with which to repay, he freely forgave them both. Tell me, therefore, which of them will love him more?
Great.
Simon answered and said, I suppose the one whom he forgives me. And he said to him, you have rightly judged. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, you see this woman, I entered your house, you gave me no water for my feet, but she has washed my feet with her tears and wiped them with the hair of her head. You gave me no kiss, but this woman has not ceased to kiss my feet since the time I came in. You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil. Therefore I say to you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she has loved much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loves little. Then he said to her, your sins are forgiven. And those who sat at the table with him began to say to themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Then he said to the woman, your faith has saved you, go in peace.
Wow, what a great, great narrative. Isn't that great? So a little bit of cultural things that will help us to really appreciate this narrative a little bit better. So Simon is the guy that owns the house, all right? He is where Jesus is dining. And what affiliation is he religiously? He's a Pharisee. Now, interesting, because thus far Jesus has been having the conflicts he's been having, and they've not been many yet. They'll get to be many. But the conflicts that have been happening have been with who? What group? Pharisees. So it's really interesting that we see here that, Simon was maybe skeptical, but Simon invites him in. Simon brings him in. But we learn something about Simon that Jesus brings out later. What did Simon not do that any good guest or any good host would have done? Wash his feet. So very common practice then. Why was it such a common practice for people to wash people's feet? Dirty. Dan. Yeah. So those of you who've raised teenage boys, and I don't mean to pick out boys more than girls, but it's true. I've been around some girls too. This is not only a boy thing, but you raise teenage boys, you kind of get this feeling. You will sometimes sit down on the couch at night. So I've been told. Never happened to me, but I've been told. And they recline with their feet up near you where you're sitting. And what usually is the response, mothers? What do you ask them to do? Or you ask them, did you wash your feet? Why? Because I can smell your feet, okay? Some of you ladies may do this with your husband. I hope not. But, those feet, even in our day, are, they're smelly critters. I have a young lady on my bus. She's the funniest thing in the world. She takes her shoes off, and right behind me, and I know when she takes her shoes off. I can know immediately when she takes her shoes off. I tell her, this is not your couch. Put them back on, or spray something in them before you come to school. I don't want to smell that, right? Well, Dan's exactly right. They were walking in mostly sandal-type attire. Dirt gets in there. Their feet are dirty. They're stinky. They come in. The first thing they did whenever a host would host something like this, people would come in. He'd usually have a servant there to wash their feet, a basin and a towel, and he would wash their feet. And they would come in, like Dan said, they would sit at the table, they reclined at the table, and then they would do their proceedings, whatever they were going to do. In this case, Simon did not do that. And so, Jesus doesn't really bring it up until Simon questions him about what in the world is going on here. Why did she do this? And what's the big deal about this? What answer did Jesus give him? Why did he say, why did she do this? Yeah. And let's just put it in human terms. How big of a sinner was she, Doug? Man, she possibly. We know she was a big time sinner, okay? And again, and well known, exactly. And so, number one, we don't know all the details, but we do know that this was a well known sinner, okay? Now understand when I say she was a big sinner, there's no such creature, big, little. But my point is this: it was a very popular situation. She knew where she was. She was destitute in her spirit. And when she met Jesus, she understood that he could cleanse her. And when he did cleanse her, she was absolutely astounded at who he was. But even before she was cleansed, she gets down and she takes this flask, and it's fragrant oil. Some translations say perfume. Oftentimes, it was something from a plant called the nard plant, and it would be a spiked nard that they would get. A lot of times this was imported from India or other places. We're talking high dollar stuff here. Now, we don't know exactly what she used. She used some kind of perfume, some kind of fragrant oil, so it may not have been the same spikenard that was used on another occasion, but we know that it was most likely a very expensive situation. And you could see that by what the reaction of Simon is. Like, what are you doing? Okay? Not only that, if you think about this, it was bold for this woman with this reputation to even be in the house of a Pharisee. That is ironic when you see her. It's almost like, what is she doing here? But what does that show us about this woman? There you go, Sharon. She wasn't going to let anything stop her. I submit we learn a lot from this woman, and right there's something we learn. She would cross lines that normally she would not cross. In fact, lines that she would not even be welcome to cross. But she said, essentially in her head, nobody's stopping me from getting to Jesus. And I'm going to tell you what, this woman understood who Jesus was and what she was given, and she was willing to do anything for him. Do you see the passion, the point, the passion she has for Jesus? I want to say this before we go any further in this narrative. You know what? If you don't have passion for Jesus, you're not going to love Jesus like this woman loved her. Passion. Passion. She'd been forgiven all these things. Listen, the first thing that we recognize when we understand the gospel is that I am destitute and need Jesus. This is the whole situation of the Pharisee where Jesus is at. This is the whole situation with this group of people, not just the Pharisees, but in particular the Pharisees. They were thinking they didn't really need anybody to cleanse their sins. They had gotten it. They had figured it out. They fasted. They sacrificed. What more do we need? We don't need the Messiah. We're on our own good. And listen, let's make the application, because we sometimes fall into this, and I suppose sometimes I say it, we'll say, man, that person is just such a good person. And we don't mean to, but we almost say it in such a way that, like, man, they just wouldn't. That's loud, isn't it? If you're in YouTube land, we're experiencing high winds here in Selinsgrove. And so if something happens, we get caught up, we'll see you at the Yellow Brick Road, I guess, right? Sometimes we look at this and we say, you know what, that person's such a good person. They would just be great. Like, well, we don't see ourselves for what we really are. In our 6 o'clock class, we're talking about God's plan of redemption from the Old Testament to the New. And I just got a great question down there. Why didn't he just bring about Christ right away? Good question, right? What's one of the reasons why he just didn't bring Christ right in Genesis 3, boom, on the scene, and everybody's redeemed? They wouldn't have understood, Dan. They needed to see the shadow. They needed to see the sin. They needed to see the blood of all those lambs and bulls and goats and realize that is because of me. And then when they realize that, wait a minute, Jesus cleanses me, then they can do what? According to Jesus, they can love much. And if we don't feel like we really need Jesus, if we kind of feel, like we're pretty good on our own, we're never going to love him like this woman did. Never. Listen, I think it's really good for us to remember where we've come from and where we've been. And I don't even think it's a bad idea for God to remind us sometimes during the day that we're not that. I'm not even so sure that it's not good. Please understand, in the context of what I'm saying, sometimes when we fall, it's a good thing, isn't it? I had a man one time in the church, this is years ago, but he said, I heard him say it, he sat on the second pew back, he said, I have not sinned in years. You know what I thought? I thought, man, I cannot relate to you. I can't relate to you. Because, man, I struggle with sin. I struggle with temptation. I struggle with thoughts. I struggle with hatred sometimes. I struggle with those. I need Jesus. And I think if we forget that, we're in trouble. And it's all about Jesus. It's not about my goodness, okay? I'm telling you right now, if it's about my goodness, I'm in trouble. But it's about the blood of Christ. Yeah, Diane. Oh, okay. Well, here she's wiping his feet. Okay. So this is great. Do you remember in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 15, Paul said, and I want you to tie this together. Paul said, a woman's glory is her hair. I want you to connect this. You know what this woman did? She wiped the feet of Jesus with everything she had. Now, we may not view it that way in our world. I think hair might be viewed differently today. I'm not exactly sure. But I know among a lot of people, hair is still a big thing, isn't it? Some cultures, it's huge. Our culture, I think it's still pretty big thing for most women, right? Most women are, what does a woman do every Tuesday or whatever? She goes and gets her hair done, right? Or however that works. Well, maybe not every Tuesday. Some women are like that. I don't know all the timing of that. But a woman's glory is her hair. Man, and a woman's glory, you've heard of women who've gotten cancer and they've lost their hair, and then like their husband and their daughters and their family will shave their head to go with her, Doug, that must have been what Doug did. Why? Because that's almost an embarrassment. It's hard for her to do that. And so they do it to match. Why? Because a woman's glory, and Paul said a woman's glory is her hair. Think about this. To take your hair and what? Let me tell you something, wives, women, you love your husbands. Do you want to wash his feet tonight? Number one, do you want to wash his feet tonight? Number two, do you want to wash his feet with your hair? Let's just get to the point where, okay, I maybe wash his feet if he can't do it himself. Well, then let down your hair and wash them. I got a washcloth for that, right? We're not going to let our glory. This woman went above and beyond. I think that's what he's showing us here, Diane. It was her glory. It was the most sacrificial thing she could do, to let down her hair and to wash his feet. And tears are streaming down. Remember, washing it with the tears and then with the oil. So you could see she had this great love for him. I want to read a quote to you. It's a little bit of a lengthy quote, but I want you to read it. It's worth it. Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers, said this, and I love it. Her service to Jesus was personal. She did it all herself and all to him. Do you notice how many times the pronoun occurs in our text? She 3 times, her twice in Luke 7:37-38. She served Christ himself. It was neither service to Peter, nor James, nor John, nor yet to the poor or sick of the city, but to the Master himself. And depend upon it, when our love is in active exercise, our piety will be immediately towards Christ. We shall sing to him, pray to him, teach for him, preach for him, live for him. Did you get that? Do you see that everything she did was to Christ? I love you. I love you passionately. Folks, I'm afraid sometimes that even among members of the church, we miss Jesus. We miss him. He is the greatest thing. He is why we are here tonight. He's why we'll assemble on Sunday. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It's not about me. It's not about you. Like, if you're putting yourself there, you're in the wrong place. Jesus is who we're here to serve. It's all about him. And this woman, she really, really understood it. And she gave the best that she could give. It really shows us something about giving too, doesn't it? Jesus accepted her gift because it was given sincerely, and it was given the best she could give. And what else could she have given that was any better than this? Simon's like some religious people we know, isn't he? He questions, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I don't understand it. Jesus said, let me tell you about this parable. Let me teach you about a parable of 2 debtors. Simon answered right, but did he get it? I don't know. I don't still know whether he got it or not. But Jesus certainly was teaching a lesson to others that were gathered there too. And he's teaching a lesson for us tonight. We see great things in this woman. What passion she had. Yeah, Dan.
Maybe I'm pushing the boundaries a little bit here, but I think her washing Jesus' feet shows his humanity too.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
even the Lord's feet got dirty.
Good point.
Even the Lord's feet needed wash.
Yeah, good point. That's a great point. I don't think you're pushing that at all. That shows his humanity. It definitely shows his humanity. He had human feet. We sometimes put Jesus away over here, in his deity, and he was deity, definitely. But his humanity too. No, I think that's a great point. Yeah, he was human. And I'll tell you what, one more thing, Dan, if I might add this to it. Now you got me thinking. What did this do for Jesus when she did that for him? Compassion. Love. If we want to go with touchy-feelies, how did it make him feel? Man, he felt really good, didn't he? Right? And so you could see how, and now don't remove it from its context. She was worshiping Jesus and he loved it. Guess what? Sunday, we'll get the opportunity to do that too. This week, we're going to get the opportunity to do it. Hopefully, you've done it already this week. Hopefully, you're doing it every day. You're not taking the Lord's Supper, but every other part of that and giving, you're not doing that like monetarily into the plate, but you're still giving. You're giving your life. You're singing, hopefully, to him. You're praising him, praying. That's all, I think about that. Sometimes we miss that. When I talk to God through Jesus, you know what? That makes them, we taught our kids this when they were little. That makes God smile. But sometimes we're not so far removed from that. Sometimes we need to tell adults that. When you do this, it makes God smile. Absolutely. This is good for us. It's good for us. It's good for God. He loves it. He wants us to worship him. Great points. All right, let's move to Roman numeral number 8. And we're going to see preaching. We're going to see preaching. And this is going to be through Galilee. So, by the way, what saved this woman? Let's end with that. Her faith. Her faith. So, Mike, she just mentally assented, mentally believed in Jesus, and that saved her? What did her faith cause her to do? Yeah, her actions. She had faith. How do you do it? James 2, because of what she did. All right? That's faith throughout the Bible. It's never just a feely, touchy thing. She did it because she had faith, and we've seen it in her actions. Let's pick up with Luke chapter 8. We're right there. Let's go through 1 through 3. And this is kind of a neat section. There's going to be a couple of names mentioned here that we're going to come to see a little bit later on. So Luke 8, 1 through 3, who would be our reader tonight for that? 3 verses. Right, Larry. Great. All right, excellent. So, interestingly, this is probably most likely the second preaching tour through Galilee. If we're looking at this right, I think we are. The first preaching tour through Galilee was found in Luke chapter 4, 42 to 44. And so here again, you see Jesus. He's just back and forth. He's just preaching. He's back in the region of Galilee, and I want you to just notice real quickly the women that are mentioned. So we have Mary and we have Joanna, and that's kind of interesting because we may not see it right here, but when we come to the resurrection, we're going to find these were among the first witnesses. Luke chapter 24, verse 10. These 2 women. And what are they doing right now? How are they helping Jesus? What's that? Yeah, they're providing for him. Absolutely, out of their means. They're helping him. And again, I think Dan made a great point on the last one. This shows the humanity of Jesus. He needed to eat, and he even needed to pay taxes, right? And so these ladies were helping him out of their means. But it's interesting. They're with him, and they're going to be with him, and they're going to be witnesses of the resurrection too. They're going to see this thing, and they're going to see it through. All right. So we have this preaching tour. He's going through. He's preaching, and while we're here, or during this preaching tour, we're going to find some interesting things. Let's go to number 1. We're going to find some plucking grain. This is the second Sabbath controversy, and this is the second near the second Passover, by the way, okay? Second Passover, and when I say second Passover, I mean in his ministry, during his ministry. All right, so let's go to Mark chapter 2. Mark chapter 2. And let's look at verses 23 through 28. And who would like to be a volunteer to read that? Leah, thank you. Excellent. Thank you, Leah. So for those on YouTube land, we were in Mark chapter 2, 23 through 28 there. And it's kind of an interesting situation. So again, who is there to pick and poke at Jesus? Pharisees. Now, I want you to see this. This is important. These folks, and you'll hear this more than once, trust me, these folks were the religious elites of Jesus' day. They were the highest in the temple. They were the most learned people in the law of God. Okay? And this is their attitude. This is where they're at. And they are nitpickers, and they are, straining at gnats. That's exactly what they're doing while they're swallowing camels, to use Jesus' analogy. So, Let's talk a little bit about this. Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse 25. In fact, somebody get that for us, would you? Deuteronomy 23 and verse 25. Deuteronomy 23, 25. When you get it, somebody just go ahead and read it. Go ahead, Dan.
If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain.
Okay. So, when you went in there, what were the disciples doing with Jesus? What were they doing here? Yeah, they were hungry. And they were picking the heads of grain. Were they sickling it? Were they reaping it for money? No. Now, this is important that we understand this. The law of God forbade anybody from harvesting this wheat or this grain on the Sabbath. Forbade it. They weren't allowed to do it. They weren't allowed to go in there with a sickle and cut it and make a profit from it. That was not the intent. God said, on that day, I just want you to rest, okay? I want you to worship and I want you to rest. That was the Sabbath day. But were these men doing any of that? No, what they were doing was they were feeding their bellies. They were plucking some heads of grain and they were eating. What they were doing was not unlawful. It was not against the Sabbath, but I'll tell you what it was against. It was against the Pharisees' tradition, the oral tradition of the Pharisees. They didn't want anybody touching any grain. And that's all well and good if one Pharisee said, you know what, I don't even want to get close to having a sickle with the grain, I'm not going to touch any grain on the Sabbath. Was there anything wrong with him making that decision? Not a bit. But what's he doing? He's binding it on everybody else. Now listen, this is so important to understand this, because what happens is people take the law of God and then they add to it and they bind that on people, and if you don't follow their little regime, all of a sudden you're not faithful. But then there are other groups that say, well, the law of God is kind of like, it's a good idea, it's a good suggestion, but if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do it. God's not going to really care about that. There is law that we must follow, and then there are traditions that we do not have to follow. And here's what's interesting. People that are steeped in tradition simply cannot accept the fact that really what God wants is what He's given us in His Word. He's real clear about it. It's not mystical. It's not mysterious. Now, there are things in the realm of safety that you may want to do. For example, Paul said there are some brothers who would really not want to eat anything that had been sacrificed to an idol. Then they buy it down the street. They want to know if it had been sacrificed to an idol. Down in the market, and Paul said, if you don't want to eat that, you don't have to eat that. That's okay for you to do. He also said there are some brothers that doesn't bother them. They don't care if it was sacrificed to an idol on Thursday and they're buying it on Friday. Just grab it and go. They don't really care. That's in the realm of opinion. That's in the realm of you decide for yourself. I may ask you, I may say, hey, brother, would you eat something sacrificed to an idol? And you may say, I just couldn't do that. But then you don't write me up in the local brotherhood paper because I ate something sacrificed to an idol. Now, in the same light, Acts 15, God was real clear about Christians not eating blood. Okay? So, if you go down to the market and you find a gallon of blood on sale, and you say, hey man, I want to make me some blood pudding and I'm going to eat that stuff. And you say to me, would you eat blood pudding? And I say, brother, that's the law of God. He doesn't want us eating blood. Well, that's okay for you not to eat blood, but if I want to eat blood, I can eat blood. Is that the same scenario? It absolutely is not the same scenario. One, God has specifically said, this is what you do. Another, God has said, you know what? It's really in the realm of opinion. And for some reason, there are those on the right that want to bind things that God hasn't bound. There are those on the left that want to loose things that God hasn't loosed. And it's not as hard as everybody makes it out to be. There are things, when it comes to worship, worship is not an opinion. Worship is not an opinion. If I say, Doug, do you like to sing on Sundays? You want to sing? Doug says, I don't really want to sing. Well, that's up to you, Doug. If you don't want to sing, that's up to you, brother. That's in the realm of opinion. Is that in the realm of opinion? No, it's not in the realm of opinion. God said, here's what I want you to do. Here's one act of worship that I want you to do. But if I say, Doug, no, this is a hypothetical. I don't have a problem with it, so please don't run with it. Doug, I just don't like it when we put the words up on the screen. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. I feel like it's mechanical. I don't feel that way. I'm giving you an example. I just don't like that. And Doug says, well, I understand that, brother. It doesn't bother me a bit. Then I run out here and say, well, the Susquehanna Valley Church of Christ is not the Lord's church. Why aren't they? They put the words up on the screen. Is that the same scenario Doug and I just discussed about singing or not sing? No, it's not. Now, can I feel uncomfortable about that? Am I okay if I'm a little uncomfortable with that? Maybe I'm steeped in my tradition and I like the old book. All right? I'm not, by the way. I like them up there. I'm just using that as an example. Have I changed anything about the worship by putting the words up on the screen? That's the key. Now, Doug may say, well, brother, in my opinion, I think a piano makes it sound so beautiful. So why don't we bring a piano? Well, Doug, that's just an opinion. Now, is that an opinion? When we bring in a piano in, what have we now done? We've added and changed. Now we're not just singing, but we're singing and playing. Now we've added to the commands of God. Now I can run out and write you up, okay? I'm joking when I say that. But absolutely, that's an unfaithful congregation. Well, how in the world can you say that, Rodney? Because God's law is very specific, okay? There's aids and there's additions. And when you addition, you've stepped out of the law of God. Go ahead, Dan. What were you going to say?
A real world example that I just thought of, and I was told it was true by a good brother, 20, 30 years ago. Before they had air conditioning in the building, they'd leave the windows open. They had screens and that, and they left the windows open. But they didn't want the flies getting on the Lord's Supper. So they put a cloth over it. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
At all, nothing wrong.
Kind of practical.
Years go by, that practice went on for years, generations, as it were. We got air conditioning, screens in the windows and all that kind of stuff. And one day, they decided that the clock wasn't needed anymore. And they literally, the church literally split over that.
Yeah.
Because some wanted to put my great-great-grandpappy and grandma had that on there.
Yep.
And we're going to continue to have that on there.
And that's sad, isn't it, brother? That's sad. For example, well, they aren't up here right now. I think they're back here. Let me just see if they're back here. Oh, yeah, they're back here. Offering. Okay? Those would make some good scrap. I'm going to scrap those this week. All right? And we're going to put a garbage can right at the front door. And when you come in, you can give into that garbage can. Now, I'm not asking if I can scrap these. I'm asking, is that okay? Religiously, scripturally, is that okay? Can we have a garbage can back there and give on the Lord's Day? Yeah, we absolutely can. Yeah, we could have a 5-gallon bucket. We could just have the treasurer stand back there with his hand open. This is great. I'm not against it. No, I think it's a good idea. But let me tell you something. That's not scriptural. It's not anti-scriptural. It's fine. It's one method for carrying out the command of God to give. You guys could just go around with your hands. You could just pull up your shirts like this. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm not being ridiculous here. I'm showing us that tradition is one thing. We don't have to have these nice things. Do we have to take the Lord's Supper? Oh, we're privileged to take the Lord's Supper. Better not take the communion away, but we can do it in a multiplicity of ways. Yeah, Sharon. Absolutely, Sharon. So Sharon said, great point. I just want to repeat it because that wind is really causing a hearing issue in here. So Sharon said, it's kind of like some people like the older songs, some people like the newer songs. That's really not the age of the song that matters. It is the lyrics. It's the words to the song, right? And remember, that's a great point, Sharon. And remember this, there's never been such a thing as an old song. It's always at one point was a new song. Okay? Do you know what I mean? And so now you have your preferences, and that's okay. But you can't bind that preference on everybody else. And you may even say to the men, hey guys, I wish we could sing more of these type songs. And the men could say, all right, or the men, the majority would say, hey, we're gonna pass around a sheet and we're gonna see what the congregation says. And let's say you're the only one that wants to sing that type of old whatever it is, okay? We're talking scriptural songs here. Well then, do you suppose you, out of one person, out of a congregation, gets their way? Is that how you do things on the playground? Mercy, no. That's not. We learn that in kindergarten, don't we? We learn that in kindergarten. I'll find my phone. Hold on. There it is. So, this is very important for us to understand. Even in the life of Christ, we need to understand that there are things that are tradition. This was a tradition of the Pharisees. They didn't want you to pluck grain, but they bound it on them. Let's just finish this real quickly. I always set my alarm. I got usually about an extra minute on my alarm. So God said in Hosea 6 and verse 6, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And I believe that's exactly what he was asking. That's what he was referencing here. That's the idea of it, okay? It's not that sacrifice isn't important, but we have to have the right motive, the right attitude. Here's something that G.C. Morgan said. I love this quote. I'm going to read this quote to you because I think it's important. Any application of the Sabbath law which operates to the detriment of man is out of harmony with God's purpose. God did not make the Sabbath man for the Sabbath. He made the Sabbath for man. All right? And we need to understand that. By the way, the incident that Jesus referred to here about David and the showbread was 1 Samuel 21, 1 through 6. And there again, was that an emergency situation? It was. He was on the run for his life, and he needed some sustenance. And, there have been people that have literally drowned that thing to death, trying to see whether David sinned and whether God allowed it and what happened and all this. The bottom line is this: God desires mercy and not always just a sacrifice. It's the sacrifice is a contrite heart, the right attitude. The disciples didn't break any Sabbath rules here. They did exactly what any normal person would have done. Had they brought a sickle out, different story. But they didn't. And the Pharisees shouldn't have been so nitpicky to begin with. One last thing. Have you ever noticed people that like to nitpick can always see the worst in everything? They can always see the worst in everything. These people were like that. But yet Jesus treated them the way he should have treated them. And we're going to see some really neat things as we go on here. There are times when I just can't even believe how Jesus walks away from them when he had the power to stop their foolishness. But he didn't. He kept on walking. What a man. What a man he was. All right, next week we will pick up with this next one. Let me get a couple stars there. And this will be the third Sabbath controversy. And as you're seeing these, they're getting a little bit more intense. Okay? Pharisees are getting a little bolder. And the tension is getting stronger between, and we're going to see it, and it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger till it leads right to the cross. Okay? Very good. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Isn't it amazing in the life of Christ, the things we can learn? There's just so many lessons there for us to learn. And we're really not that much different than the folks of Jesus' day. We have to check ourselves. We've got to check our hearts. We've got to check our motives and all those type of things. I do have just a couple of announcements.